Drake's $5.7 million watch collection. Let's take a look. We've got a Rolex Daytona discontinued yellow gold John Mayer with the green dial. That today is worth around $80,000. Next up, we have the Rolex Day-Date 40, the Get dial with the RBR bezel, the yellow gold with the diamond set bezel. But they put $40,000. Yeah, I'd like to buy one for that. That watch today is worth around $70,000.
This factory diamond set Patek Philippe Nautilus that if you wanted to buy will cost you over $750,000.
Drake has 143 Rolexes in his watch collection. Just in this picture alone, the watches are worth more than $1 million.
I'm going to Fire Herald. Why? The watch is a fake.
What's fake about it?
According to the serial number,
It doesn't correspond out.
You pay $4,400 for a Tudor Black Bay Monochrome. You pay almost $10,000 for a Rolex Submariner. Drake thought he was wearing timepieces fit for a king. Turns out, some of them were built in a Chinese factory next to rice cookers and USB fans. What started as a viral TikTok unraveled a $120 million courtroom war, a CEO meltdown, and the biggest luxury scandal in Rolex history. And yes, Drake took it personal. It was barely 15 seconds long. No music, no captions, just a single pan of a dimly lit factory floor somewhere in China, and a row of what looked unmistakably like Rolex watches. Not knockoffs, not bootlegs. These weren't the fake flexes you see hawked on the sidewalk. These were flawless, down to the serial numbers, the weight, the finishing, even the green holographic sticker on the back. At first, it was just a whisper on TikTok. A few watch nerds raised an eyebrow. Someone commented, "Ain't no way these are real." Another replied, "That's a Submariner, with a correct re-hot engraving. That's not a replica." Then the video disappeared, but it was too late. Screenshots had already made their way into Reddit threads, watch forums, private collector group chats, Discord servers buzzing like a live leak had just dropped. Because if what they saw was real, it meant that one of the most prestigious luxury brands on earth wasn't telling the full truth. And that's before a certain A-list rapper was caught wearing something that now looks suspicious. But we'll get there. First, let's talk about what this factory video really revealed, and why the Swiss watch world might never recover. Once that TikTok vanished, it didn't end the story. It started one. Because if there's one thing the internet does better than expose secrets, it's investigate them. Reddit threads started popping up like mushrooms after a storm. In our /watches and our /rep time, users zoomed in on the video frame by frame, matching case fonts, lug thickness, even the shine of the ceramic bezels. Someone cross-referenced the crown guards to a specific 2020 Submariner release. Another claimed to have used metadata to trace the footage to a known OEM supplier in Shenzhen. Then came YouTube. Watchfluencers with 1 million+ subscribers. People who normally spend 20 minutes comparing the dial font on vintage Omegas suddenly turned into digital detectives. They dropped hour-long breakdowns with red circles, slow-motion pans, supply chain diagrams. One video got 500,000 views in a week with the title, "Rolex Factory Leaked." But it's in China. And the theories? Unhinged. Some swore it was just a high-end replica ring. Others said the Chinese factory was a legitimate supplier, making unofficial watches on the side during off hours. Same parts, same machines, different shift. A few even speculated this was part of an authorized operation, where Swiss companies secretly white-labeled Chinese components to meet demand, then slapped on a Swiss-made stamp. But the deeper they dug, the messier it got. People started pulling customs records. Rolex had always been famously opaque about their supply chain. But now users were finding freight logs with suspicious entries. Boxes labeled timepiece components, routed through Hong Kong to Geneva. Whistleblower posts, anonymous, unverified, started appearing on Chinese forums, claiming that multiple luxury brands source parts from the same industrial zones. And then someone found it. A still shot from an old Instagram story, reposted by a fan page. In the background, clear as day, was one of those same Chinese Rolexes. Not in a factory this time, in a glass display case. In Drake's house. That's when everything shifted. Because this wasn't just about collectors anymore. This wasn't niche. This wasn't geeky. This was Drake. Someone tag him in a comment. Champagne Poppy, explain this please. Are your Rolexes fake too? And just like that, the scandal hit warp speed. Drake, who's long been known for flexing his horological taste, suddenly became the unintentional poster child of the mystery. His $5.7 million collection, once a symbol of elite taste, was now under the microscope. Fans compiled a timeline of every Rolex he'd ever worn, piecing together red carpet appearances, Instagram lives, even music videos. The white gold Daytona with the meteorite dial? Under review. The iced out yellow gold Submariner with the emerald bezel? Suspicious. The custom piece, gifted by John Mayer? People started wondering if he had questions too. Edits and montages exploded across TikTok. Soft jazz under slow-motion clips of Drake flipping his wrist, now captioned with, "Is this what betrayal feels like?" Fashion blogs ran headlines like, "Did Drake get duped? Fake flex? Champagne Poppy's Rolexes under fire. Swiss-made or Shenzhen shade?" Drake didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence only made it worse. By now, even people who couldn't tell a date just from a Casio were paying attention. Because if Drake's watches weren't what they seemed, what else wasn't? This wasn't just a collector's mystery anymore. It was a global scandal, one that threatened to collapse the illusion of luxury itself. And it was only just getting started. Drake didn't post. He didn't tweet. He didn't address the rumors. He vanished. No captions. No press. No publicist spinning a quote to Billboard. Because Drake wasn't interested in clout. He was interested in truth. Sources close to him say he started with the obvious. He pulled every single Rolex from his private vault. Dozens of them, each worth anywhere from $30,000 to over $500,000. These weren't just watches. They were heirlooms, investments, gifts from friends, customized pieces with engraved casebacks. One was rumored to have been given to him by Virgil Abloh. Another was a prototype, never released to the public. But now, each one sat under a sterile light, ready for scrutiny. He didn't trust just anyone. He flew in a team of independent experts, forensic horologists, materials analysts, people with microscopes powerful enough to read serial numbers etched into screws the size of a grain of rice. They came from Geneva, Tokyo, and Los Angeles. Former Rolex employees, industry defectors. He hired a private lab with clean rooms used for semiconductor inspections. Some of the tests used were typically reserved for nuclear-grade metals. His team performed spectrographic analysis on the screws, X-rayed the internal movements, disassembled the rotor assemblies bolt by bolt, verified the weight distribution on the oscillating mass. They even tested the glow of the lume under UV to compare it to Rolex's proprietary chromolite compound. What they found changed everything. Let's get one thing straight. None of the watches were fake. Not in the traditional sense. They weren't knockoffs. They weren't $300 flea market specials from Canal Street. They passed visual inspection with flying colors. Serial numbers matched Rolex's own records. Paperwork? Flawless. Movements? Stamped with Geneva's finest hallmarks. But the deeper the lab went, the uglier it got. One Submariner had a screw alloy that wasn't Swiss steel. It was a titanium blend traced to a factory in Guangzhou. A rose gold Daytona had a rotor stamped H21, a known Thai subcontractor for micromechanical parts. The lubricants in a $400,000 GMT Master 2 didn't match what Rolex officially uses. Even the spring bars, those tiny rods holding the bracelet, were slightly too light. Outsourced. It was like discovering your Ferrari had an engine built in a lawnmower factory, but only when you tore it apart atom by atom. One report concluded, this is not a counterfeit. This is a deconstructed Rolex, reassembled through a shadow supply chain, possibly with corporate knowledge. Authentic on the outside, globalized on the inside. In short, a Swiss shell with a global gut. The betrayal wasn't about money. Drake could buy the factory if he wanted. The betrayal was philosophical. Rolex built its empire on the idea of purity, handcrafted, obsessive quality from a nation synonymous with precision. But what Drake uncovered was something else entirely. A lie hiding inside a legend. 2 weeks later, the gloves came off. Drake filed a $120 million lawsuit in New York's Southern District Court. The target? Not Rolex directly, but a shadowy network of suppliers, authorized dealers, and allegedly complicit subsidiaries operating across Switzerland, Hong Kong, and the Cayman Islands. The claim? Deceptive trade practices, material misrepresentation, heritage fraud. The case named 10 entities by name and left open the possibility of amending to include Rolex SA directly, pending discovery. The language was brutal. My client was led to believe he was buying a watch. What he bought was a performance, a brand propped up by illusion, where Swiss made is just a sticker, not a standard. Drake's lawyers didn't pull punches. The complaint accused the luxury watch industry of using legal loopholes and quiet offshoring to mass-produce authenticity. That the Swiss-made label had become a fig leaf, covering up a dirty, global supply chain more Alibaba than Alpine. The lawsuit wasn't about damages. It was a reckoning, an exposé, a declaration of war on an industry that had always assumed its secrets were too boring or too sacred to ever be challenged. And just like that, the man who once flexed Rolexes on stage was now trying to burn the myth of Swiss luxury to the ground. It started like any high-profile trial. Security guards with earpieces, men in tailored suits clutching briefcases like battle gear, rows of media, sketch artists scrambling, whispers about whether Rolex executives would show in person. But nobody was prepared for what happened next. On the third day of testimony, Jean-Frédéric Dufour, the famously reserved CEO of Rolex, took the stand. The courtroom held its breath. The man had never done a public interview. He rarely appeared at brand events. Rolex didn't do PR, didn't do press. They floated above it all. Until now. And then, he cracked. A cross-examination question about subcontracted tie rotors hit a nerve. Dufour fumbled, denied, then hesitated, and then, on record, blamed third-party oversight. The opposing lawyer pounced. You're saying Rolex has no knowledge of the origins of its own components? Silence. Dufour twitched, leaned forward, and muttered into the mic. Do you people understand what you're doing? You're not exposing fraud. You're destroying art. Boom. Gasps echoed. Cameras clicked. Reporters tripped over each other, racing out to file. It was over. Not the trial. The myth. Within hours, that quote was everywhere. TikTok DJs sampled it into EDM breakdowns. Twitter turned destroying art into a meme. One user posted a Rolex spinning in a microwave with the caption, "Art is dead." The hashtag RolexGate trended for 72 hours straight. People remixed courtroom footage like it was a music video. One TikTok creator set it to Beethoven's Fifth, intercut with slow zooms on Dufour's sweating face. Another cut between his meltdown and scenes from The Devil Wears Prada, dubbing Meryl Streep's lines over the judge's voice. The luxury watch world had always carried itself like a secret society. Now it was a circus, and the ringmaster just admitted the magic trick was fake. Just when it seemed like the trial had reached its dramatic peak, the real twist dropped. A surprise witness was called in. Testifying remotely, face blurred, voice altered, credentials verified in a sealed document submitted to the judge. He called himself Marcel, and he claimed to be a former Rolex engineer. His opening line? I'm the guy who used to calibrate the rotors before we stopped making them ourselves. Silence. Then chaos. Marcel laid it all out. Starting in the early 2010s, Rolex began quietly shifting internal components to offshore suppliers. Not because of demand, but because of cost efficiency. Certain metals were cheaper to source in Asia. The polishing of base plates? Done in Hong Kong. Screws? Bulk ordered from China. Lubricants? Shipped in barrels from Malaysia. According to Marcel, Geneva was just the final stop, the pretty wrapping. We called it the frosting process. You bake the cake overseas and ice it in Switzerland. He swore that executives knew, that they relied on the loophole in Swiss law that allowed a watch to be labeled Swiss-made if just 60% of its value came from Switzerland, even if the goods were globally sourced. His testimony was clinical, cold, devastating. The illusion of pristine Swiss prestige? Dead on arrival. Rolex, the brand that had defined perfection, suddenly looked like a smoke and mirrors operation with a marketing budget and a soldering gun. The courtroom didn't explode this time. It went silent. Because the truth wasn't shocking, it was worse. It was believable. The effect was immediate. Within a week, celebrity stylists began quietly editing Rolex's out-of-press photos. Instagram influencers started tagging #NotRolex in old posts and issuing disclaimers. Stylists who once begged for vintage Daytonas now refused to pull them for red carpets. One NBA star, widely known for his $2 million watch collection, posted a photo of his wrist completely bare. The caption? "Time's up." Auction houses saw listings for Rolex timepieces drop 17% in a month. Two prominent rappers removed lyrics referencing Raleighs from their tour visuals. Even luxury resale platforms began issuing authenticity disclaimers for Rolex products, warning buyers of potential component ambiguity. It was no longer about one man's lawsuit. It was about an empire unraveling. The brand that had stood untouched for over a century was now bleeding reputation in real time. Because if Rolex wasn't real, then what was? One tweet summed it up best. When the most authentic brand turns out to be a costume, the whole luxury game is cosplay. Rolex wasn't just on trial anymore. It was in cultural freefall, and everyone was watching. It came on a gray Thursday in Geneva. Reporters packed outside the courthouse in scarves and trench coats. TikTok live streams ran nonstop for hours, drawing hundreds of thousands of viewers as people waited, phones in hand, for a decision that had stopped being about horology and started being about truth. The court ruled in Drake's favor. Rolex was ordered to pay $85 million in damages, not for counterfeiting, but for deceptive business practices, brand misrepresentation, and consumer fraud. It wasn't the money that stung. It was the precedent. Swissmade no longer meant what it used to. The ruling forced regulators to reevaluate the entire label, potentially appending the certification process for every legacy brand in Switzerland. Luxury conglomerates scrambled, lobbyists flooded Bern, and PR departments went into overdrive. Inside Rolex HQ, heads rolled. Jean-Frédéric Dufour, the man who once ruled the brand with quiet control, resigned by sunset. His official statement was only 42 words long, ending with, "I regret nothing except the silence." And then came Drake. No entourage, no legal team, just him in a tailored black coat, emerging from the courtroom into a wall of flashing cameras and screaming questions. He paused, lifted his hand, bare wrist up, and tapped it with 2 fingers. Then he said, "That wasn't about a watch. That was about respect." No more words. He got into the back seat of a black Maybach and drove off. The clip of that moment would become the most watched video on Instagram Reels that week. NBA players quoted it. Pop stars referenced it in new lyrics. One prominent fashion critic called it the most important celebrity statement of the decade. Drake didn't just win the lawsuit. He ended an era. Because in a world built on image, influence, and illusion, he made truth the ultimate luxury. In the ashes of a $120 million reckoning after the courtroom chaos, the cultural reset, and the mass Rolex exodus, everyone thought Drake would cash the check, ice up again, and move on. But he didn't. No flashy comeback. No tell-all interview. No limited edition revenge Rolex with a lightning bolt engraved on the dial. Instead, he went silent. For 3 weeks, Drake disappeared. And then, he dropped a link. No press release. Just a tweet. It's time. http://truthtime.global. At first, no one knew what they were looking at. A sleek black website. A countdown timer already at 0. And in the center, one sentence pulsing in soft white text. This is not a brand. This is a system. Truth Time wasn't a new watch line. It wasn't merch. It wasn't a collab. It was open source blockchain tech designed to do one thing: make luxury accountable. Every item, whether a timepiece, handbag, sneaker, or couture garment, could be registered, scanned, and verified against a tamper-proof ledger. Chain of custody, material sourcing, factory origination. Every node publicly auditable. Every brand or individual welcome to participate. Drake didn't partner with anyone. No Rolex rival. No tech giant. not even a crypto sponsor. Because this wasn't about profit. It was about trust. He funded the entire platform himself, quietly hired a team of decentralized tech engineers, ex-luxury execs, and supply chain watchdogs. Truth Time launched with a manifesto, not a mission statement. If luxury is built on stories, the truth should be part of the story. There were no logos on the homepage, just contributors, whistleblowers, former stylists, watch experts, environmental activists, blockchain devs, the people the industry had ignored for decades. And here's what made it seismic. The people followed. Within a month, major celebrities began registering their private collections. Custom fashion houses started listing their goods on Truth Time to prove their ethics. One rapper who used to flaunt iced out Audemars, he dropped a song titled No More Lies and included his Truth Time wallet link in the lyrics. Fashion brands panicked. A few tried to launch knockoff authenticity platforms, but they were ad-driven, brand-owned, and fake transparent. Truth Time had no filters. If your item was made in a Shenzhen sweatshop and white-labeled in Paris, it showed. The public was obsessed. Unboxings changed. Red carpet rundowns shifted focus. Is it Truth Time verified? Became a new, who are you wearing? Even Wall Street took notice. Authenticity startups saw valuation spike. Fashion houses scrambled to retrofit supply chains. Forbes ran the headline. Drake just did what regulators couldn't. He made luxury tell the truth. And Drake? He didn't celebrate. He didn't even post. He just updated the Truth Time homepage with 7 new words. Not a watch brand. A watchdog. He didn't burn the house down. He built a new one. And this time, the locks are on the inside.